In a world filled with uncertainty, we are all trying to get physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy. But the struggle is real. The LiveWell Podcast exists to give you fun, relevant, and impactful strategies that will help you get healthy, stay healthy, and live well. Hosted by Dr. Mike Roncesvalles, a clinical psychologist with 2 decades of experience in the field, and his LiveWell crew. We promise the time you spend listening to the LiveWell Podcast will help you thrive like you never have before.
And welcome to the LiveWell Podcast. We're really glad you guys are listening. We've got a great podcast ready for you. We've got the whole LiveWell team here. Alana Sadu.
Hello.
Megan Torkowski.
That's it.
And Trevor Hislop.
That's right. It's good to be here today.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
I know I was
Dr.
gone. I was
Mike.
on
That's
vacation
right.
for a week. I took care of myself. Are you guys proud of me?
We
So
are
proud.
Are very proud of you.
Very proud.
It's showing.
Is
Well
it really?
done, Dr. Mike.
Oh, yeah.
You look rested.
I'm rested, revived, renewed,
Rejuvenated.
You're ready to go.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's do this. This is going to be the best podcast ever.
Woo!
Happy.
Woohoo!
Fueled by North Carolina and like the pure boredom I experienced there for about a week or less.
If you're tuning in from North Carolina, we apologize.
We apologize for Dr. Mike.
I'm actually apologize that you live there.
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah.
That's my
Oh
thing.
my gosh.
So, anyways,
Just a bunch of hills.
it was all right.
It's
I mean,
beautiful.
it was
the scenery.
It was pretty.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, and I went fly fishing, which was awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you caught some fish.
like 20.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
That was the best day.
That's amazing. That's cool.
It was like,
I've never done that before.
well, I have.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything else for like 5 days, but I did go fly fishing.
That's
so
awesome.
It was awesome. Anyways, let's talk about emotional wellness today. I think that's our topic, and we want to try to help people understand what emotional wellness really is and what it means and how we can have it. I think during this season of our kind of moment in time, now's a great time to talk about emotional wellness during the pandemic, or what we hope is the tail end of this pandemic of COVID-19. How do we grab hold of this concept of emotional wellness? So we'll start with the question of what is it? Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
So I think that you're right, Dr. Mike. Like, what else is new, right? You're right. So
Not the first time I've heard that.
Oh, goodness.
it's such a
Here we
great
go.
it's such a great time too, because it's been a year since our shutdown. It's been a year since everything started changing for everyone here, and here we are now trying to make sense of it. And I'm excited to talk about emotional wellness and what it means to me and what I think it means to humans in general.
So I took the liberty of formulating a definition of emotional wellness. It just popped
Did
in
you?
my
Oh,
head.
did it?
Yeah,
Did it
right
really?
before we started. I want you guys to know that this is my own definition.
Okay.
Huh.
I would love to hear what that is, Dr.
Yeah.
Mike.
Wait.
Megan had nothing to do with it. I'll
Not
just
one
start there.
bit.
She had nothing to do with this definition. All comes from me. Emotional wellness is permission to be mindful and present in the throes of our life.
Wow, that's so good.
Yeah, there's more.
There's more.
Paying attention to your reactions to those challenges of life, and then building an awareness of what helps you cope.
It's very good.
Is
That's
that
good.
It's very
That's really
insightful.
good.
Wow.
I think I read
So,
that somewhere.
You read it as if there was 3 things, right? So
Yeah.
what
That's
was-
exactly how Megan said it earlier.
Megan, can you enlighten us, right? But it has this progressive kind of feel to
It
it,
does.
right? Can you
Yes.
read it again?
Yeah.
Yes.
So permission to be mindful and present
Yeah.
in the throes of life, paying attention to your reaction to those challenges of life, and building an awareness of what helps you cope.
Okay. Yes.
It's beautiful.
So I did say that, and Mike put it in 3 lovely statements because I do talk progressively, and it just keeps going and going and going. And if you don't stop me, I'm not going to stop.
I could
So-
listen to you all day long. I'll never stop you.
Oh, thank you. So I think basically there's not really more to tell about that. I just think that you need to have that emotional awareness, and you need to give yourself permission to be present and mindful in whatever comes at you in life, and then recognize your triggers, recognize how you're reacting to those things, and then be willing to cope with it and accept it and do something about it. And if you're not, you're just going to remain stuck in that repetitive behavior or darkness, just something like that.
So this is funny because this goes back to a conversation that we just had before we started the podcast. Somehow we got on the topic of my mom.
Yeah.
And these guys were asking me about my mom, right? And like what she was like. And
I wish
my
we had
mom
met
was
her.
100% the sweetest person you've ever met, right? Ever in your life. But they were asking me, like, what did your mom do when she corrected you? Like how? And I was like, I don't think my mom ever corrected me. I don't think ever a moment where she said, Mike, stop, ever. But like when you grow up like that, I kind of left my house with not a whole lot of awareness, like in general, right? It was just like I didn't have a whole lot of awareness of like negative. I liked a lot of positive, but I didn't like a lot of negative. So I grew up even into my 20s without really liking to be aware of the negative. I was just like, well, let's just not think about that because that's no fun. And
you didn't have any practice.
I had zero practice. But kind of life is life, right? So you get older, you start dealing with real issues and challenges, and I had to develop the ability to figure out how to feel, honestly. And grad school was huge for that. If I had not gone to grad school to be a psychologist, I'd probably be a very, very different guy right now, because that's the only way I knew how to like even start to look at what was negative and build an awareness of it. And that goes to one of the questions we wanted to talk about today is why is it even important? And as an 18-year-old, I didn't even think it was important. And I know that a lot of my clients that I work with don't want to think about this at all. Like they come in and part of the reason they're here is because they're super depressed or anxious or stressed out or burned out, but they don't want to acknowledge it, admit it, or verbalize it. And not having that awareness is the very thing that keeps them from being emotionally aware. Why do you think we do that?
Where do I begin? So,
That's
like,
a loaded question.
I think oh my gosh, where do I begin? So I think a lot of it is learned behavior, right? Like it's a combination of learned behavior, our environment, like your lack of, awareness of like the negative emotions or like feeling willing to experience them was learned because you learned positivity all the time. And, the problem with, I think, just not being aware or practicing other emotions is like it kind of goes against humanity. It like goes against the only thing, or not the only thing, but I think the most important thing that differentiates human beings from like any living species is like our broad spectrum of human emotion. And like I always tell my clients, like feelings are for feeling. That's why they're called feelings. We're supposed to feel them, not avoid them or dismiss them or or suppress them. But I think naturally, because of what we learn, we want to suppress the negative or difficult things.
Every wife listening right now is like cheering, literally cheering right now, because I don't know about you guys, but when I work with couples, not every time, but a lot of times, guys are not as good at emotional awareness. So I've done therapy a lot on the Space Coast. So the Space Coast is a big aerospace engineering area. Yeah. So we have these engineers come in.
Science-minded.
Dude. And it's like, why do I even care? I don't care about emotion. That's like not factual. I can't taste it or touch it or feel it. Or So what relevance does that have for our life? So what you're saying right now is huge, because what we're establishing is the only way to be emotionally well, the only way to have a good, solid, healthy marriage, the only way to have a good, solid, healthy emotional experience in life is to be aware of what's going on inside of you. It's tough. It's tough for a lot of guys.
That's right. Yeah. When we started, you gave the working definition, and it starts with give yourself permission, right? I think that's huge, right? before, as we get through that, so those kind of active words: give yourself permission, pay attention, have awareness, right? And so the idea of giving yourself permission, right, to feel these feelings or to process, or to let yourself into your own experience, I think is huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, so I kind of grew up the opposite of the way Dr. Mike did, right? And so I hope my mom's not listening, but it was always,
She probably is, honestly.
it was always, don't get mad, like, don't be angry, don't cry, or I'll give you something to cry about. So like, there was a lot of tension and negative emotions that I had all the time. And it was always, don't feel.
Yeah.
Like, don't,
Right.
and that was a very, I think, Caribbean way of growing up in the islands, and, sort of just not even like acclimating to feelings. And so I had to kind of relearn that in probably undergrad, going into graduate school. I kind of had to relearn that because I realized that, part of feeling whole and full is comprised of physical health, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And all of those cups have to be full. And I think when we know that one of those cups are empty, like, we feel it right away. And part of that is emotional awareness too, right? But emotional wellness is its own cup that I think has to be full to feel whole. And sometimes I think like human beings, we just really work hard on filling all of the other cups.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I heard you talk about that and reminded me. With your mom, right? When she's talking to you about don't cry, don't do these things. There's this probably this idea that, right, strength happens when you're hiding those things, or they're not showing those things, right? Which is a facade.
Right.
And I heard you talk about it, and actually the opposite is true, right? We are stronger, right, when those cups are full.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
When we really have health in all of those areas.
For sure.
But then that's not what culture tells us.
Right.
It's not what our society says to us.
Being vulnerable is considered being weak.
Right.
In a lot of cases, when in actuality, if you're vulnerable, you are so strong because you are able to let those things out and own them and let them be a part of your daily life and practice.
So this is hard, because I think what we're describing is that natural human tendency in our brokenness to just be prideful. I mean, I know that was it for me. Like, there was a big part of it for me was, I don't want to feel like that. Like, that's for other people.
Yeah.
That's not for me.
Yeah.
And that's pride. That's nothing other than pride.
Right.
And so I think a lot of, like, the whole male thing that we're talking about, that we come with a lot of pride.
We do.
As a group. And so that's what prevents us from allowing ourselves to just be honest about what's going on inside of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the give ourselves permission piece of it, right?
And I think, like, the question that not just men, right, but everybody, but probably particularly men, that you probably want to ask yourselves is, like, at what cost? What is this costing me to not show up for myself? Because not showing up for yourself means not showing up for everyone around you.
Right.
Your family, your spouses, your kids, the people you work with.
Well, what's weird about it is not acknowledging it does nothing to eliminate it. Right? So just because I don't want to acknowledge that I'm angry does nothing to eliminate the fact that I'm kind of angry, right? And so I'm treating people poorly, and so acknowledging it is part of getting through it. Until we acknowledge it, we literally can't get through it. And when we're stuck in our crap all the time, other people, our family, our spouse, our coworkers, sorry about that, are constantly having to live with our emotion being played out, in passive aggressive ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it gets stored in your body somewhere. It stays there and it festers, and it's just like an ant bite that you keep scratching at.
Do you know that that's actually why men in the United States of America are at higher risk for heart disease than women?
because they bottle up their feelings and emotions. That's great.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's true.
What's interesting, about as you're talking about, again, as a man, I've experienced this firsthand, right? We often feel like if we can hide something, others won't see it. And what I mean by that is I'm going to hide the fact that I'm hurt. Nobody else will see it. Nobody else will experience it. But the reality is that's not true.
It plays out in other ways.
Oftentimes we're the last ones to let ourselves in to what everybody else sees around us about us.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think we come to the table, men a lot, but it's universal. Shame is the one of the most core emotions that we try to hide. Like the idea that somehow we're not enough, or somehow there's something about us that's just so flawed and messed up. I remember I had a client one time, I'll never forget. He said this. He said, "Mike, it's a matter of time. It's just a matter of time until people reject me. I'm that messed up and broken and kind of disgusting." Well, that's no way to go through life. That's no way to go through life.
There's no hope in that statement.
No.
And I mean, then that boils down to like flawed beliefs that we have about ourselves, and those are the things I think that feed into and exacerbate anxiety and depression and, and anger and feeling stuck, like you guys were talking about before. Those are the things that keep us stuck.
Yeah.
Right. And you start to believe that over time and time and time and years and years, you have created a new belief system. We don't come out of the womb that way. And so think about somebody who practices that belief for 30 something years of their life or 40 years of their life.
Yeah, and they're hiding it, like you're saying, Trevor. So you've got that belief system. It's deeply rooted, like at your core. You think no one else sees it, yet you're acting in ways that everybody else sees it.
Yeah.
And then the end result is you're sort of toxic. And what, like there's this toxic stuff inside of you. You're not coping with it. You're not dealing with it. And pretty soon you're throwing up that toxicity on everybody around you.
For the record, for all of our listeners and viewers out there, if you feel like you are hiding your emotions and you're doing a good job at it, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And you're affecting the people around you.
It's a little public service announcement. That's right.
And you're not alone.
No.
At all.
And for the record, the quicker you acknowledge the feeling, the quicker you can go through the feeling and come out the other side. I think the more we suppress it and the more we try to hide from it, hide from it, the longer it just sits there in the darkness waiting to come out.
And the bigger it gets.
One of the things we talked about before we started the podcast was compassion, right? And this idea of compassion for others, but really what we're talking about is compassion for self.
Yes.
Right. And similarly, it's so easy for us to have compassion on others, right? This idea that we have empathy for them, or we care for them, or we suffer with them, and yet we struggle so much to do that for ourselves. Yeah. Right. To care for ourselves, to have compassion on ourselves.
And Trev, what's the Latin root of compassion?
Yeah. So compassion comes from a Latin word called compati, which means suffer with, which is the same idea of empathy, but that's that's the root word for compassion.
So to have self-compassion is to be willing to suffer with yourself.
That's right.
Like to acknowledge the idea that I'm
so interesting.
It's beautiful.
It's kind of wild because it's so different than what we're taught culturally about what healthy looks like.
Right.
But if you look at successful people, like let's kind of turn this on its ear. Our culture says, don't do that. But the truth is the people that do that, the wholehearted people, the people that you want to be around, the people that you see at the mall or, at the beach or what, that you're like, man, I want to be around that guy. That guy just looks great. Or what a great lady. Those people are just kind of like what you see is what you get. Like here I am, warts and all, and I'll let you see it all. And I'm not going to put pretenses on, and I'm not going to pretend to be somebody I'm not. Those people, I don't know about you guys. I love to be around those people. It's just easy.
Yeah.
Right.
There's something extremely attractive about the people that are identifying, I'm not all that attractive. Right. Like you said, warts and all.
Yeah.
They're truly authentic.
And that's
inside and out.
And that's part of self-compassion too, right? It's showing up for yourself and like understanding that it's okay to even be not okay when you're not okay. And like you were saying, Dr. Mike, the first step to even doing that is identifying when you're not okay. So
That's right.
It's a little bit of a multi-step process, but you know, anybody can master that. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And think about what you're demonstrating for others when you can be that wholehearted or holistic.
That's right.
And the ability to be vulnerable and be yourself.
It reminded me, I came from 20 years in the church world, and in church culture we talked about the Christian F word, which was fine.
Oh.
Like, I'm fine.
Oh, I love this one.
How are you? I'm fine. And we jokingly would say that's like the Christian F-bomb.
That
You
is
know?
there's an acronym
You're
for
not
that, but
fine.
Yeah.
Nobody's fine.
No.
Come on.
I don't think I'm going to say it on air.
There's some. I
There's
want
an
you to
acronym.
say it, but there's a lot of profanity in it.
There
Can you
is.
say it without? Let's just say blank. So there's an acronym for
There is
fine.
an
We say it to each other all the time when I'm like, "Hey, Megan, how are you?"
It's I'm blanked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
Wow, that's
F-I-N-E.
fine.
I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. So if you guys have ever heard me say that in my head, I
Yep.
said the other thing.
That's awesome. Now we know.
Good to know. Good to know. I heard a guy
That's
talk.
been passed around for years to come. Like, I don't even know how long ago that started,
Yeah.
but it's been
Yeah.
around for a while.
I have a great example of what we're talking about, kind of on the heels of that. We had a CEO speak the other day at this thing that I did, and he spoke with such vulnerability. He was up in front of like hundreds of people, but he started to talk about just like his struggles and what really drives him and his fears. And that is not what you hear at most business luncheons. But Trevor, you were there. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
But he talked about like if anybody could see like the GoPro in his head, you know, that kind of recorded his thoughts and his life. He's like, that's a terrifying idea to think that, you know, anybody could really know what goes on inside of me. But isn't it great to kind of know that the big CEO feels the same way, and like he's a human and he's got issues just like we all do. And it's that vulnerability. I know this. I talked to tons of people after that talk, after he gave that speech, and everybody was like, man, that was so good. That was so great to hear. My GoPro, nobody wants to see my GoPro, right? So I think what we're describing is the human experience. And if we can all just allow ourselves to be human, then a lot of our issues go away.
Right. And recognize in others that others are human. Because I think when we don't see that in ourselves, we tend to get very frustrated and irritated with others a lot more quickly because we're not willing to accept the flawed nature that is within ourselves as well, because we have that high expectation to be strong and not be vulnerable.
I think we're kind of building this interesting definition of emotional wellness. It's like emotional wellness as wholehearted living, so to speak, and the opposite of that being pride, because that's really what we just described. The opposite of wholehearted living, of just open, honest, authentic living, is prideful living. What do we do about this?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
Well, I think you start to take some inventory.
Okay.
Check in with yourself.
Check in with yourself. If you're having a rough morning, maybe look back and see what happened that might have triggered that the night before, or what you could have eaten, or who you were spending your time with, who you were surrounded by. There are so many different things that could have triggered that negative emotion in you. And it honestly could have been from weeks ago, but somebody did something yesterday that reminded you of what happened 2 weeks ago, and that's still in there. So just check in with yourself. Become aware of what's going on internally when you start to feel the bubble rising in your blood, and like the heat coming on, and the sweating, and you know, the frustrated feeling.
So a lot of times I'll have people like my clients, not just random people.
Just
My
someone
clients-
off the side of the
I
road.
just go up to people at the mall.
Sure.
Have you ever thought about doing a
That's
feelings
where I know
log?
you from. Oh my God. Like 6 years ago, you just came up to me in the
That was
mall.
In the mall.
You're that guy.
That's me.
Just kidding. Okay, go ahead.
With my patients, I have them create a note in their phone, and the note says whatever they want to label it, that people, they're not going to be freaked out if people look at their notes, but really what they're doing in that note is they're logging their emotion. Like they're basically saying, okay, between breakfast and lunch, how do I feel? And I'm telling you, it's so funny. Some of these engineers are like, they come in like the note is empty. They're like, I had no feelings. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
bro,
That's right.
you don't understand.
Lots of thoughts, but no feelings. Yeah.
You had a feeling.
Something was happening.
So getting used to like challenging yourself to say, okay, what's actually going on inside of me?
And name it, right? Like we have
Yeah,
to be able
give it a
to
name.
call it what it is. I think there's shame in that too, though, is saying like I feel discouraged, or I feel embarrassed, or I feel disappointed. Like there's even shame in saying that out loud or saying it to ourselves, but we have to name it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with anger. I've always struggled with anger. And my old
We know.
I struggle with feeling it. I don't like it. Like I
Yeah.
really think
Yeah.
that it is an ugly emotion, and I had to work with my therapist on this a long time ago, and she was like, you have to accept that that's an emotion, that is a feeling, it's telling you something. And I was like, no, I don't want to. So we worked on it for a really long time, and I still kind of battle with it.
That's so powerful though, because anger is a God-given emotion that
Right.
helps us respond to injustice, right? Like, so if something is going on that's unjust, anger is actually an appropriate
It's
response
appropriate.
to
Yeah.
it.
That's right.
But as in all these emotions, we really don't want to live in emotions that create distress for us, right? So like if you're angry in response to an injustice, that's awesome. If you're angry from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed for 7 years, that's not a great life, right? So it's like labeling it, understanding it is what allows you to walk out of it.
Right, exactly.
That's good.
Yeah. And if anything, like that gives us the capacity to feel things on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like we can't experience true joy unless we can be face to face with sadness.
Right.
We can't be able to live in what serenity actually is if we haven't experienced or went through anger or frustration.
Right.
So I think once we give ourselves permission to feel the negative stuff, we make room for the positive stuff too.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned earlier about pride. Pride is the antithesis, the opposite, right, of this, of emotional wellness. And you pitched the question, right, like how do we get rid of it, right? What do we do with it? We talked earlier about authenticity, right, vulnerability. Those things promote humility, right, which
Yeah.
essentially
Oh, I
is
love
the
that.
opposite of pride, right? So how do we start to work towards humility?
So poetic. Isn't he, Trevor? So
Yes.
poetic.
That's deep, man. That's very deep.
But it's hard, right? I mean, it's
To be
So
humble.
you're saying it starts with humility.
yeah. How do you get there,
That
right?
makes so much sense.
That is a great question. How do you get there? How do you get to the point to where you can live a humble life and live life in humility? Because man, I tell you what, that is not what we're looking at. The Instagram worthy photos are not our most humble moments.
I was just gonna say, when you brought up the word humility, and I was thinking, what humility means to me, if I want to share that with you guys and our viewers and listeners, it's showing up with all of your flaws, like showing up with your flaws and like not really making any attempt whatsoever to cover them up. I'm talking about inside and on the inside, on the outside, just kind of showing up as who you authentically are.
I
the
think
raw
that's-
canvas
the world.
Oh.
of what you're made of.
I think that's a great definition because humility is so often thought to be weak, right? Going back to that whole idea.
Yeah.
If it's humiliating,
Right.
that's negative.
It's embarrassing.
Right.
You don't want anyone to see it.
That's right. If it's humbling, it feels bad, right? But it's not. And I love
It's not,
the definition that or the idea of what it is.
It's like the emperor has no clothes. right? Like we
Right.
just all pretend that we're not the reality of who we are when everyone sees it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if we can have grace for ourselves, then that lets us have grace for other people, and that's the kind of world we want to live in. That's the kind of world we want to live, but that's not what we're taught. That's not, if you go to any social media platform right now, the influencers are usually not the ones that are, the super humble, just authentic people, right? The influencers. I was watching this girl yesterday, and I literally wanted to throw my phone in the pool or something. It was wild. She's some, I don't even know who she is. She's some artist or whatever, musician, and she was like, I'm going to my custom kitchen, and she had like money, that was like out, and she was like, because everyone has rolls of money
just
in their
laying
kitchen.
around
And
in
she
their
walks
kitchen.
around like that all the time.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I do. I don't know about you guys. It was just so kind of disgusting. I was like,
It was just so fake.
it's
So
so
fake.
fake. And I was like, my kids are watching this thinking it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of the opposite of cool.
Yep.
Not authentic.
Yeah. A moment of confession. So the other day I had to send a headshot and a bio for something I'm doing. And when I took a picture for the headshot, I added a filter to it because I was like, look at all those wrinkles. I'm like, and I did. I fell into, the deep sea of social media pressure.
Right.
And I added a filter before I sent the headshot.
What did I say? I think it was to you guys last week. I hate that something about guys. You guys don't wear makeup. You don't have to. You guys grow up and you look great. And we still continue to cake our faces with makeup. And we feel like we don't look good if we don't have makeup on. Literally. Like it's...
We have a makeup artist that comes to the LiveWell set. Just kidding. So no, you're
very natural looking, but still.
It's hard, guys. I think that's the bottom line, is what we're encouraging people to do is actually really difficult in our world to try to live out. So for us to even have the conversation is the first step. If you're listening today, even having the conversation with yourself, with your spouse, is the first step in us going forward culturally. All right, 60 seconds. What do we do? What are the strategies that you would encourage any listener or viewer to do if they want to build this emotional wellness?
I'm a big fan of affirmations on the bathroom mirror. Like positive, uplifting affirmations to remind yourself that you are worthy and you are beautiful inside and out and you are enough and you are meant to be here and your story is important.
And what do you write that in?
You can write it with lipstick on the
I was
mirror.
just gonna say that.
You can write it.
Sharpie?
You can write it
On
with a
Post-its.
Sharpie on Post-it notes. You can, if you are an artist and you want to put it on a canvas and hang it right next to your mirror in the bathroom, by all means.
Great idea. Anything else?
Yeah, I think for me, the three takeaways from the definition you gave us, again, give permission, pay attention, and have awareness. But like a tangible thing for me is practice some humility, right? Practice some vulnerability.
Yeah.
I could probably start that today, right?
So, Alana, do we have to come on here makeupless next time? To practice humility?
Hey,
That would,
Trevor and I did it today.
That's right.
So,
We do it most days. I don't know about okay, every day.
that would be like systematic desensitization if we just showed up
Yeah,
here without
yeah.
makeup.
We'll try it one day.
rapid
One day.
process.
That's right.
We will.
One day we will.
I think for me,
I'll do it with
the
you.
actionable in that is, again, when my filter wants to kick in, don't let it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Just allow it to be raw. Allow it to be real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself. Like, be true to yourself and your feelings. That's, what I want you guys to take with you today, listeners and viewers. Show up for yourself. Give yourselves the same compassion that you so freely give to others. And know that vulnerability is actually the greatest strength that anybody could ever have. And Brene Brown says that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And give yourself time. This does not happen overnight.
What a great podcast. I'm encouraged. I don't know if you guys
Absolutely.
are, but I feel like that was an incredibly challenging 30 minutes for us to spend together. If you're listening today and you feel like you're struggling in that area of your life and you feel like, man, I'm one of those engineers, Mike, that you talked about that just can't do emotions. I just don't want to. I don't like it. I don't want to be vulnerable. I can't stand the idea of authenticity. If that's you, we want to help you go forward. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. So we've got a platform that we've developed specifically to help you go forward. It's called LiveWell Coaching, and LiveWell Coaching is an app-based platform that will give you lots of information and tools that will help you develop the ability to be emotionally healthy and emotionally well. Like, that is the whole idea. It's got cognitive behavioral strategies built into it that a real coach, like a real person on the other side of that technology, will push to you every day. Just things that will encourage you, inspire you, that will help you practice a lot of these strategies that we talked about today. That coach is also there 7 days a week to speak into you, give you accountability and affirmation, and just the personal connection that's required for change. So if you want to go forward in your life, maybe you're depressed, maybe you're anxious, maybe you're having relationship problems, and you're like, yeah, that's why, because I just can't be real. Reach out to us. Go to livewell-coaching.com. livewell-coaching.com. There's tons of information there on that website. You get some free downloads of relaxation audio. You can watch a lot of our podcast. There's lots of things you can do there, but you can fill out a form that will connect you with one of our assessment coordinators, and that person will reach out to you within 24 hours and begin to walk you through the process to just tell you what it's like to be on the LiveWell coaching platforms. We hope you do that. We want to be available for you. And if you have questions, anything that you want us to answer about what that process looks like, or even just a question you have about our content today, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Go to livewell-coaching.com. There's forms there on the website that you can ask questions and touch base with people. We'd love to connect with you and help you go from where you're at to where you want to be. So thank you so much for listening today. We appreciate it. And from the entire LiveWell team, we will see you next time.
Happy Monday. Take care.
Bye.